My golden retriever was my lifeline, but my mother sold him while I was away because my brother's children demanded the newest iPhones. They laughed and told me to get over it. I didn't. I tracked him down, bought him back, and then initiated a financial apocalypse that left them screaming. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The silence of the house was the first thing that hit me. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was heavy, thick, and wrong. Usually, the moment my key turned in the lock, there was a rhythmic thump-thump-thump of a heavy tail hitting the floorboards, followed by the scrambling of paws on the hardwood and a happy, low whine that signaled I was home. I had been gone for 3 days on a grueling work trip in Chicago. My head was pounding from the flight, my shoulders were knotted with tension, and all I wanted, literally the only thing that had kept me going through 8 hours of spreadsheet analysis and client meetings, was to bury my face in Rusty's golden fur. He was more than just a dog to me. After my father passed away 3 years ago, Rusty had been the anchor that kept me from drifting away entirely. He was a purebred golden retriever, yes, but his value wasn't in his pedigree. It was in the way he would rest his heavy head on my knee when my anxiety spiked, grounding me when the world felt like it was spinning off its axis. "Rusty," I called out, dropping my suitcase by the door. My voice echoed in the hallway. "Nothing." A cold prickle of fear started at the base of my neck. "Mom, Janice," I called out again, stepping further inside. My mother, Janice, was sitting in the living room. The television was on, playing some daytime talk show at a low volume. She didn't look up when I entered. She was scrolling through something on her tablet, a cup of tea steaming on the coaster beside her. The scene was so normal, so mundane, that for a split second I thought I was overreacting. Maybe Rusty was just sleeping in the backyard. Maybe he was tired. "Where is he?" I asked, my voice tight. Janice finally looked up. Her expression was unreadable, perhaps slightly annoyed that I had interrupted her reading. "Oh, you're back early. I thought your flight landed at 7. "It landed at 4. Where is Rusty?" I repeated, the panic now rising from my stomach to my throat. I glanced at the corner where his oversized orthopedic bed usually sat. It was gone. My heart skipped a beat. Not just the dog, the bed, the water bowl, the basket of toys, all of it gone. "Mom," I said, stepping in front of the TV to block her view, "where is my dog?" Janice sighed, a long, dramatic exhalation of air that suggested I was being incredibly unreasonable. She set the tablet down on the coffee table and smoothed the fabric of her pants. "Bethany, sit down. We need to talk about being realistic." "I don't want to sit down," I snapped, my hands trembling. "I want to know where Rusty is. Did he run away? Is he at the vet? Tell me." "He didn't run away," she said, her tone casually dismissive, as if she were discussing a piece of old furniture we had donated to charity. "We found him a new home, a nice farm out in the county. Better suited for a big dog like that. You work too much anyway, it wasn't fair to him." The world seemed to tilt sideways. You rehomed him without asking me? "He's my dog, Mom. He's microchipped to me. You can't just give him away." "Well, it wasn't exactly a giveaway situation," she muttered, picking up her tea and taking a sip. She refused to meet my eyes now. "Gary needed help. You know how hard it's been for him since he lost that contract job. And the twins, well, they're at that age where they need things to fit in at school." I stared at her, my brain struggling to process the non sequitur. What does Gary's unemployment have to do with my dog? "Megan found a buyer," Janice said, her voice gaining a bit of defensive strength. "A breeder, actually. He has good papers. They offered a very generous amount. Enough to get the twins the new iPhone Pros they've been crying for, and a little extra for Gary and Megan to catch up on their car payments. We sold him, Bethany. He's gone." I felt the blood drain from my face. My knees actually buckled, and I had to grab the arm of the sofa to keep from collapsing. "You sold my dog to buy cell phones." "They aren't just phones, Bethany, it's status." The kids were being bullied for having those old models. You don't understand because you don't have children, she shot back, looking at me with a sudden flash of anger as if I were the one in the wrong. You have a good job, you have plenty of money. You could have bought Gary those phones months ago, but you didn't. So we did what we had to do. You'll be fine, you can. Get another dog, maybe a smaller one that doesn't shed so much. The cruelty of it was breathless. It wasn't just the theft, it was the absolute casualness of it. She had sold my best friend, the living creature that had caught my tears for 3 years, so my 7-year-old niece and nephew could have $1,000 gadgets they didn't need. I looked at the empty spot on the floor where his bed used to be. I could almost see the ghost of him there, thumping his tail. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself. It was a physical blow that shattered the very foundation of trust I had held for the woman sitting in front of me. The next hour was a blur of nausea and white-hot rage. I physically couldn't breathe properly. I ran to the backyard, hoping against hope that she was lying, that this was some sick joke and Rusty would be there chasing squirrels by the fence. But the yard was empty. His runner cable was gone. The heavy-duty pooper-scooper was gone. They had scrubbed the house of his existence. I rushed back inside, my hands shaking so badly I could barely unlock my phone screen. Who did you sell him to? Give me the name. Now. Janice was back on her tablet, aggressively ignoring me. I don't know the name. Megan handled it. She met the man in the parking lot of the mall 2 days ago. Stop making a scene, Bethany. You're acting hysterical. Hysterical, I whispered, the word scraping my throat. You sold my family member. It was a dog, she snapped. And honestly, the money was necessary. Do you know how much pressure Gary is under? At that moment, the front door opened. My brother Gary and his wife, Megan, walked in. They were laughing about something, carrying bags of takeout food. The smell of greasy burgers filled the room, turning my stomach. Hey sis, welcome back, Gary boomed. He looked entirely too relaxed for a man who was supposedly under so much pressure. He was wearing a new jacket I hadn't seen before. Megan followed him in, holding 2 sleek white apple boxes in her hands. She saw me standing there, pale and shaking, and her smile faltered only slightly before turning into a smug, pitying look. Oh, Janice told you, Megan said, placing the iPhone boxes on the dining table with a reverent gentleness she had never shown any living thing. Look, Bethany, don't be mad. It was for the best. That dog was way too big for this house anyway. And look, she tapped the boxes, the twins are going to freak out when they get home from school. It's a good thing we did. Where is he? I demanded, stepping toward Megan. Who did you sell him to? Gary stepped in between us, puffing out his chest. Whoa, calm down. What's done is done. The guy paid cash, no receipt, no names exchanged. He's probably halfway to the next state by now. You need to let it go. You stole him, I said, my voice trembling with the effort to not scream. That is theft. That is grand larceny. He is worth thousands of dollars. Gary laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. Theft! Come on, Bate. You live here, Mom lives here, we're all family. Property is communal. Besides, you basically owe us. You're the one with the fancy degree and the 6-figure salary, hoarding it all away while your family struggles. We just leveled the playing field a little bit. I looked at them, really looked at them. Janice, who I had moved into this house so she wouldn't have to go to a retirement home. Gary, who I had bailaid out of debt 3 times in the last 5 years. Megan, who constantly made snide comments about my single status while enjoying the dinners I paid for. They stood there, united in their justification, clutching their takeout and their new technology, looking at me like I was the villain for mourning a loss they had orchestrated. They thought they had won. They thought that because I was quiet, because I was the responsible one who always fixed things, I would just roll over and accept this. He's gone, Bethany, Janice said from the couch, not looking up. Stop ruining the evening, we're having burgers. I took a deep breath. The air tasted stale. I looked at the iPhone boxes on the table. The cost of my happiness, the price of my loyalty. You're right, I said, my voice suddenly dropping to a calm, deadly whisper that surprised even me. I need to be realistic. Gary smirked and clapped a hand on my shoulder. That's the spirit. I knew you'd come around. Grab a burger. I pulled away from his touch as if he were burning me. I walked to the stairs, my legs feeling like lead. They resumed their conversation immediately, the tension evaporating from the room for them, but not for me. They were laughing about a video Megan had seen online. They had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten who signed the checks. They had forgotten whose name was on the deed to this house. They had forgotten that the family they claimed justified their theft was entirely subsidized by the person TH. I had just betrayed. They thought I was just a bank account with a heartbeat. They didn't realize that by taking the one thing I loved purely, they had severed the only tether keeping me from treating them exactly like the liabilities they were. To understand why the loss of Rusty felt like an amputation, you have to understand the last 3 years of my life. When Dad died, the family fractured. Gary fell apart in a loud, chaotic way, drinking, losing jobs, fighting with Megan. Janice fell apart in a quiet, needy way, refusing to manage her own life and leaning entirely on me to navigate the probate, the funeral, and the bills. I was the one who had to keep it together. I was 26 at the time. I buried my grief under spreadsheets and overtime. I worked 14-hour days to secure a promotion so I could buy the 4-bedroom house we were currently standing in. I moved Janice into the master suite on the ground floor because her knees were bad. I let Gary and Megan stay in the guest cottage out back, just for a few months, while they got back on their feet, a few months that had turned into 2 years. I absorbed everyone's pain, and the only creature who absorbed mine was Rusty. I had bought him as a puppy 2 weeks after the funeral. He wasn't just a pet. I had paid for specialized training to help him detect my panic attacks. He knew when my heart rate spiked before I did. He would press his body against mine, a warm, living weight that reminded me I was here, I was safe, and I wasn't just a machine built to dispense money to my relatives. And now, he was gone, sold by the very people I was killing myself to support. Up in my room, I didn't cry. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop. The sound of their laughter drifted up from the kitchen. They were celebrating. They had the phones. They had the takeout. They had the victory. I thought about Megan. In many ways, she was the architect of this misery. Gary was lazy and entitled, but he lacked the initiative to be truly malicious unless prodded. Megan, however, was driven by a deep-seated insecurity that manifested as materialism. She was the one who constantly compared their children to the neighbors. She was the one who would make comments like, "Must be nice to afford designer shoes," whenever I bought work clothes, ignoring the fact that I paid for her children's dental work. Megan was a lifestyle influencer with 300 followers. She spent her days curating a life she couldn't afford, posting photos of my house and tagging it as blessed, pretending it was her own achievement. She was polished, pretty in a sharp-edged way, and completely hollow. I could hear her voice downstairs now, shrill and excited. "Oh my God, Gary, look at the camera quality on this. The twins are going to be the coolest kids in class. We need to film their reaction for TikTok." "Totally," Gary agreed, his mouth full of food. "Mom, you want to be in the video?" "Sure, honey," Janice replied. The sickness in my stomach hardened into something cold and iron-heavy. They weren't just thoughtless, they were predators. They looked at my life, my assets, and even my heart as a resource to be harvested. Janice, the matriarch who was supposed to protect the family unit, had become the enabler-in-chief. She had always favored Gary. He was the baby, the boy who could do no wrong. I was just Bethany, steady, boring, reliable Bethany. The one who didn't need looking after. The one who didn't need a dog because she had her career. I opened a new browser window. I wasn't going to sleep. I wasn't going to scream at them anymore. Screaming accomplished nothing with people who lacked a conscience. I needed information. Megan said she met the man in the mall parking lot. I whispered to myself, replaying the conversation. Cash transaction, no receipt. That was a lie. Megan never did anything without a digital footprint. She lived her life on her phone. If she found a buyer, she found them online. I cracked my knuckles and stared at the screen. I work in data analysis. I find patterns in millions of lines of code. Finding a single golden retriever sold within a 20-mile radius in the last 48 hours wasn't just possible, it was inevitable. I navigated to Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist, and the local Hoobly classifieds. I started filtering. Search golden retriever. Filter posted within 3 days. Location 50-mile radius. Nothing immediately obvious. They wouldn't have posted it publicly on their own profiles because they knew I would see it eventually. They would have responded to a wanted ad or used a burner account. I switched tactics. I went on Megan's public Instagram. She posted everything. Maybe she had slipped up. There it was, a story posted 2 days ago, a picture of the twins crying. Caption, "My babies are so heartbroken they can't fit in. Mama is going to make it happen, no matter what, hustle whatever it takes." And then a comment. From a user named K9LoverSteve, on a different post of hers from a week ago. A picture of Rusty in the background of a barbecue photo. The comment read, "Is that a purebred? Nice-looking dog. If you ever need to downsize, let me know. Looking for a stud for my breeding program." My blood ran cold. A breeding program? Rusty was neutered. I had made sure of it when he was a puppy because I didn't want to contribute to overpopulation, if they sold him as a breeder. I clicked on K9LoverSteve's profile. It was private, but his bio had a link to a website, Steve's Golden's Premium Puppies. I clicked the link. The address was in a rural town 40 minutes away. I looked at the clock. It was 9:00 p.m. I grabbed my keys. I didn't pack a bag. I didn't change out of my work clothes. I walked downstairs. The living room was quiet now. They must have gone out to the guest cottage to give the kids the phones. Janice was asleep in her chair. I walked out the front door, got into my car, and reversed out of the driveway. I wasn't just going to get my dog back. I was gathering evidence. And when I returned, the dynamic of this house was going to change forever. They thought they had sold a dog. What they had actually sold was their safety net. The drive to the address listed on Steve's Golden's website took 45 minutes, and every second of it felt like a lifetime. It was a dark, moonless night, the kind where the headlights seemed to get swallowed by the asphalt rather than illuminating it. My hands were gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles had turned white. I wasn't crying anymore. That initial wave of grief had calcified into a cold, hard determination. I was in crisis management mode, the same headspace I entered when a client's database corrupted or a project deadline was moved up by a month. Emotional detachment was a survival mechanism, and right now, it was the only thing keeping me from driving off the road. I knew I had leverage, I just had to figure out how to use it. Megan had sold Rusty as a stud to a breeder, but Rusty had been neutered at 6 months old. It was a responsible decision I'd made to ensure his health, but right now, it was my ace in the hole. Megan, in her haste to get cash for those phones, had likely lied to the buyer. She probably didn't even know the difference or simply didn't care. She saw a dog, she saw a price tag. She didn't see the medical history. The GPS led me off the main highway and onto a gravel road that snaked through dense woods. The houses here were sparse, separated by acres of dark, overgrown land. Finally, the voice navigation announced, "You have arrived," as I pulled up to a chain-link gate. A sign hung crookedly on the fence, Steve's Golden's, private property, beware of dogs. I killed the engine but left the lights on. A moment later, a floodlight snapped on from the house, a single-story ranch that had seen better days. The front yard was patchy dirt, and from around the back, I could hear the cacophony of barking. Dozens of dogs. My heart hammered against my ribs. A puppy mill. My mother had told me he went to a nice farm. This was a prison. A man stepped out onto the porch. He was heavy-set, wearing a stained undershirt and holding a flashlight. He looked angry. I stepped out of the car, raising my hands slightly to show I wasn't a threat, though I felt like I could tear the world apart with my bare hands. "I'm here for the golden retriever you bought 2 days ago," I called out, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through me. The man, presumably Steve, marched down the driveway. "Who are you? One of those animal control freaks?" "No," I said, standing my ground. "I'm the owner of the dog. The woman who sold him to you stole him from my house." Steve stopped a few feet away, shining the light in my face. I squinted but didn't flinch. "Stolen?" She said she was the owner. Said she needed cash for a family emergency. "I paid good money for that dog. He's got papers." "She showed you my papers," I corrected him. "And she lied to you about more than just ownership. You bought him for your breeding program, didn't you? You saw purebred and saw dollar signs." "He's a good-looking dog," Steve grunted, crossing his arms. "Big frame, good coat." "He's neutered," I said. The words hung in the cool night air. Steve's face went slack, then red. "What?" "He was fixed 3 years ago," I said, pulling out my phone and bringing up the veterinary records I kept in my cloud drive. I held the screen out to him. "Look, orchiectomy. Date, June 12th, 2021. You bought a stud dog that can't breed. She scammed you." The transformation in Steve's demeanor was instant. He wasn't a moral man, he ran a puppy mill after all, but he was a businessman, and he realized he'd been taken for a ride. He let out a string of curses that made the air turn blue. That little liar. She swore he was intact, said she just lost the certificate B. He was good to go. "She swindled you," I pressed, seeing my opening. "And since the dog is stolen property, if I call the police right now, they'll come take the dog back, and you'll be out the money and looking at a possession of stolen goods charge. Or..." Steve narrowed his eyes. "Or what?" "Or I buy him back right now. I pay you exactly what you gave her. You get your money back, you avoid the cops, and you get rid of a dog that is useless to your business." Steve chewed his lip, weighing the options. "I paid $1,200 for him." My stomach lurched. $1,200. That was the price of my best friend. That was the price of my sanity. And it was roughly the price of one iPhone Pro. "Fine," I said. "I'll transfer it to you via Zelle right now. But I need 2 things. I need my dog, and I need you to sign a piece of paper stating exactly who sold him to you, when, and for how much." "I ain't signing no confession," he spat. "It's not a confession for you," I assured him. "It's a receipt. It proves you bought him in good faith from Megan. It protects you. And it proves she sold him." 10 minutes later, I was walking around the back of the house. The smell was overwhelming, sawdust and ammonia. But there, in a solitary wire run at the end of the row, was a heap of golden fur. "Rusty," I whispered. His head snapped up. He let out a sharp bark, then threw himself against the chain link, whining and crying. I fell to my knees as Steve unlocked the gate. Rusty barreled into me, nearly knocking me over, licking the tears off my face, his tail thumping so hard against my legs it actually hurt. I buried my face in his neck, inhaling the scent of him, dusty now, and smelling of the kennel, but underneath it all, still him. "Let's go home, buddy," I sobbed. "I've got you." I secured Rusty in the back seat of my car. I had the transaction record. I had a scribbled statement from Steve on a greasy notepad. I had a video on my phone of Steve confirming Megan was the seller. I didn't drive home. I drove to my friend Sarah's house 3 towns over. I couldn't risk taking Rusty back to the house yet. Not until I had secured the perimeter. Not until I had executed the rest of my plan. Sarah, a lawyer and a dog lover, took one look at my face and the exhausted dog and opened her door wide. "Stay as long as you need," she said. "He's safe here." I left Rusty sleeping on a rug in her guest room. I got back in my car. It was 2:00 a.m. I was exhausted, but my mind was razor sharp. I wasn't just a sister or a daughter anymore. I was a creditor coming to collect a debt. I walked into the house at 7:00 a.m. The house was quiet, the morning sun filtering through the blinds, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It looked so peaceful, so deceptively normal. I went to the kitchen and made coffee. I needed the caffeine. I sat at the dining table, the same spot where the iPhone boxes had been the night before, and waited. Around 8:30, the house began to stir. Janice was the first one down. She shuffled into the kitchen in her robe, looking for her morning tea. When she saw me sitting there, fully dressed in my business suit, staring at a blank wall, she paused. "You're up early," she said, a hint of caution in her voice. "Did you sleep?" "No," I said simply. "Well, don't take it out on us," she sighed, filling the kettle. "I hope you've calmed down about the dog. It's done, Bethany. You need to move on, focus on your work." "I am focusing on my work," I said. "I'm very focused." Gary and Megan came down a few minutes later. The twins were already at school, dropped off by Gary earlier, presumably with their shiny new status symbols in their pockets. Megan was scrolling on her new phone, her face illuminated by the screen. "Morning," Gary grunted, opening the fridge. "We out of milk." "Gary," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it had a quality that made him stop and turn around. "Sit down." "What now?" he groaned. "Are we still doing this? Look, Bate, I'm sorry about the mutt, okay? But the kids are so happy. You should have seen their faces. Isn't that worth it?" "Sit down," I repeated. Megan rolled her eyes but pulled out a chair. "Make it quick, Bethany. I have a yoga class at 10. I looked at them, the three people I had built my life around, the people who lived in my house, ate my food, and spent my money. "I want to ask you one last time," I said, looking directly at Megan. "Where is Rusty?" Megan sighed, an exaggerated, theatrical sound. "Oh my God. We told you. He went to a farm, a nice family with a big barn. He's chasing chickens or whatever. He's happy. Why can't you just be happy that he's happy?" "A farm," I repeated, "and the name of this farm." "I told you I didn't get the name," Megan lied smoothly. "It was a cash thing. The guy was Amish. Yeah, Amish. They don't do paperwork." "Amish," I said. "Interesting, because the Amish usually don't run puppy mills in." "The next county over under the name, Steve's Goldens." The room went dead silent. Megan's thumb froze over her phone screen. Gary's hand stopped halfway to the milk carton. Janice turned slowly from the counter. "What are you talking about?" Megan asked, her voice pitching up an octave. "I found him, Megan," I said, sliding a printed screenshot across the table. It was the photo from Steve's website, combined with the transaction record I had printed at Sarah's house. "I found him at 11:00 p.m. last night, in a cage, surrounded by filth. That's your nice farm. A puppy mill." Megan's face flushed a deep, blotchy red. You stalked me." "I investigated a theft," I corrected. "But here's the interesting part. Steve was very upset. See, you sold him a stud dog. You told him Rusty was intact. You committed fraud, Megan. You scammed a scammer." "I didn't know," Megan stammered, looking at Gary for help. I assumed." "You lied," I said. "Just like you lied to me about the farm. Just like you lied to the kids about where the money came from. You sold my service-trained, companion animal for $1,200 to a place that treats dogs like livestock." "Well, you got him back, didn't you?" Gary interrupted, puffing his chest out again, trying to use aggression to cover his embarrassment. "So what's the problem? You have the dog, we have the phones. Everyone wins. Stop being such a drama queen." "Everyone wins?" I looked at him, incredulous. "You stole from me, you traumatized my dog, and you lied to my face." "We did what we had to do for the family." Janice chimed in, slamming her mug down. "Stop attacking your brother, he's trying his best. You have so much, Bethany. You have this house, you have your job, you have everything. Why are you so stingy? Why do you begrudge your nephew and niece a little happiness?" "Stingy?" I stood up slowly. "I pay the mortgage, I pay the utilities, I pay for the groceries you're eating right now. I paid for your car repairs last month, Gary. I paid for your dental surgery, Mom." "That's what family does," Janice yelled. "We help each other." "No," I said, my voice shaking with the effort to remain calm. "I help you. You take from me. There is a difference. And yesterday, you decided that my feelings, my property, and my heart were less important than a piece of technology. It's just a dog, Gary shouted. Get over it. He is not just a dog, I said, leaning over the table. He is the only thing in this house that has ever loved me without conditions, and you sold him. I looked at the iPhones on the table. I hope those phones are worth it, because they are the most expensive phones you will ever own. What is that supposed to mean? Megan sneered. You going to ask us to pay you back? Good luck, we're broke. Oh, I know you're broke, I said coldly. I know exactly how broke you are, and I know why. I walked out of the kitchen before I did something I regretted, like throwing the coffee pot. I went straight to my home office and locked the door. Gary's words echoed in my head. Everyone wins. You have so much. They genuinely believed that. They believed my resources were infinite and their access to them was a birthright. They didn't see the theft of the dog as a crime. They saw it as an unauthorized withdrawal from an account they owned jointly. I sat down at my desk and unlocked my safe. I pulled out the deed to the house. My name, only my name. I pulled out the utility bills. My name. I pulled out the credit card statements for the emergency family card I had given Janice for groceries and medical prescriptions. I logged into the credit card portal. I hadn't looked at the itemized list in months. I usually just auto-paid it. That was my mistake. Trust is expensive. I started scrolling. Target, $450. Sephora, $200. Liquor Barn, $150. GameStop, $300. There were charges for groceries that were clearly not groceries. There were cash withdrawals. The card I had given my mother for her blood pressure medication was being used to fund Megan's makeup habit and Gary's video games. I pulled up the bank transfers. Over the last year, I had transferred $5,000 to Gary for car repairs and job interview suits. I cross-referenced the dates with his social media, which I had never bothered to check before. Transfer date, May 12th, $800 for transmission repair. Gary's Facebook post, May 14th, weekend at the casino, feeling lucky. They weren't just mooching, they were embezzling. Systematic, coordinated financial abuse. They had been bleeding me dry while smiling in my face, and when the cash flow wasn't fast enough for their whims, they liquidated my assets, my dog. I picked up the phone. My first call was to the bank. I need to report a card as compromised, I told the agent. No, not by a stranger, by an unauthorized user. I want to cancel it immediately, and I want to freeze all secondary cards linked to my account. Certainly, ma'am, that's done effective immediately. My second call was to a real estate attorney I knew through work. Hi, David, it's Bethany. I need to know the legal process for evicting family members who do not have a lease but have established residency. Yes, I own the property 100%. No, they don't pay rent. Okay. 30 days notice? Perfect. Can we have the papers drawn up by this afternoon? I'll pay the rush fee. My third call was to the non-emergency police line. I'd like to file a report for theft and fraud. Yes, I know the perpetrators. I have a signed affidavit from the buyer they sold the stolen property to. The value is approximately $3,000, including the training costs. Yes, I'd like to press charges. I spent the rest of the morning compiling a dossier. I printed the bank statements, highlighting every fraudulent charge. I printed the car repair, transfers, and stapled them to the photos of Gary at the casino. I made copies of the affidavit from Steve. Around noon, I heard a commotion downstairs. Mom, the card isn't working. It was Megan's voice, shrill and panicked. I'm at the checkout and it says declined. I listened from the top of the stairs. Try it again, Janice's voice floated up. There's plenty of limit on it. Bethany just paid it. I tried it 3 times. It says card canceled, stolen. Everyone is staring at me. Let me call her, Janice said. My cell phone rang, Mom calling. I watched it ring. I didn't pick up. I heard Gary's voice booming now. She probably messed something up. She was acting psycho this morning. Just come home, Megan. We'll fix it when she comes out of her hole. She better fix it, Megan snapped, presumably on speakerphone. I have $300 of stuff here. I smiled. It was a grim, humorless smile. They were panicking over $300 of stuff. They had no idea that the roof over their heads was about to vanish. I waited until 6:00 p.m. I knew they would all be home then. I wanted them together. I wanted them comfortable. I wanted them to think the morning's argument was the end of it. I packed a small bag. I wasn't staying here tonight. I wasn't staying here until they were gone. I walked downstairs carrying a thick manila envelope. They were in the living room again, eating pizza. The smell of pepperoni and grease filled the air. The twins were on the floor, glued to their new screens. Finally, Janice said when she saw me. Megan had a terrible time at the store. You canceled the card? That was incredibly petty, Bethany. You need to reactivate it right now. We need groceries. No, I said. What do you mean, no? Gary stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. Don't start this power trip. You're mad about the dog, we get it. But you can't cut off the food money. That's abuse. Abuse, I repeated. That's a strong word, Gary. Let's talk about abuse. I walked over to the coffee table and dropped the envelope. It hit the wood with a heavy thud. What's this? Megan asked, eyeing it suspiciously. That, I said, is the receipt for your life. Open it, I commanded. Janice reached out and opened the envelope. She pulled out the stack of papers. The first thing she saw was the eviction notice, drafted on official legal letterhead. Notice to quit, she read, her voice trembling. Bethany, what is this? It means you have 30 days to get out, I said calmly. All of you. The house is going on the market, or maybe I'll just change the locks, but you can't live here anymore. You can't do that, Gary shouted. This is our home. Mom is on the... Wait, Mom isn't on the deed. He faltered, realizing the truth for the first time. Mom is a guest, I said. You are guests, and guests who steal from their hosts get evicted. And the rest, I pointed to the papers. Those are the police reports. Grand larceny, fraud, identity theft regarding the credit cards. Gary's face went pale. Police reports? You called the cops on your own brother. You sold my dog to a puppy mill, I said, my voice rising just enough to cut through the room like a blade. You stole thousands of dollars from me. You laughed when I cried. You told me to get over it. I looked at each of them. The fear was starting to set in. The realization that the golden goose hadn't just stopped laying eggs, she had turned into a dragon. I'm staying at a hotel tonight, I said. When I come back tomorrow, I expect you to be packing. If you damage 1 inch of this house, I will sue you for everything you don't have. Bethany, please, Janice wailed, tears finally streaming down her face. You can't do this, we're family. Family wouldn't have sold Rusty, I said. I turned to walk out. I had one hand on the doorknob when Megan, desperate and vicious, screamed the words that would seal their fate. You selfish bitch, it's just a stupid animal. My kids need those phones, you're going to rue. In our lives over a dog. I stopped, I turned back slowly. The air in the room seemed to vibrate. No, I said softly. I'm not ruining your lives over a dog. I'm ruining your lives because you're parasites. And I just called the exterminator. I walked out and slammed the door. As I walked to my car, I heard the first scream. It wasn't a scream of fear. It was a scream of pure, unadulterated rage as the reality of their new world crashed down on them. I spent that night in a hotel room that smelled faintly of lemon polish and industrial carpet cleaner. Rusty was curled up on the duvet at the foot of the bed, twitching in his sleep, letting out soft, muffled yips. Every time he moved, I woke up, my hand instinctively reaching out to reassure myself that he was real, that he was here, and that he wasn't in a cold wire cage in the middle of the woods. By morning, my phone was a brick of notifications. The flying monkeys had been deployed. In narcissistic family dynamics, flying monkeys are the enablers sent by the abuser to guilt-trip the victim back into submission. Janice and Gary had been busy. I had 43 missed calls and over 100 text messages from aunts, cousins, and even a few of my late father's friends. "How can you do this to your mother? She says you're putting her on the street." "Aunt Linda, Gary said you snapped over a dog. Call me. You need to get a grip, Bethany." "Cousin Mike, we're coming over at noon to mediate this. Do not lock them out." "Uncle Bob." They were trying to control the narrative. They had spun a tale where I was the unstable, heartless daughter having a mental breakdown, and they were the innocent victims of my erratic rage. They wanted a tribunal. They wanted a showdown where the pressure of the family collective would force me to back down, tear up the eviction notice, and refill the bank accounts. I looked at Rusty, who was watching me with soulful, trusting eyes. I looked at the dossier of evidence in my bag. "Okay," I whispered. "They want a mediation. Let's give them a show." I didn't reply to anyone. I showered, dressed in my sharpest blazer and slacks, armor for the modern battlefield, and drove back to the house. When I pulled into the driveway at 11:50 a.m., it looked like a block party. Uncle Bob's truck was there. Aunt Linda's sedan. 2 cousins were smoking on the porch. Inside, I could see movement. They had rallied the troops. They thought numbers would intimidate me. I left Rusty in the car with the AC running and the doors locked. I wasn't exposing him to their toxic energy. I grabbed my heavy manila envelope and my laptop. I walked through the front door. The living room was packed. Janice was sitting on the sofa, clutching a tissue, looking frail and devastated. Megan was next to her, holding the twins' hands, looking like a martyr. Gary was standing by the fireplace, looking somber and misunderstood. The moment I entered, the room went quiet. Then, the wall of sound hit me. "Bethany, thank God," Aunt Linda started, marching over to me. "Look at your mother. She's a wreck. You need to apologize right now and fix this mess." "You can't evict family, Bate," Uncle Bob grumbled from the recliner. "That's not how we do things. Your dad would be ashamed." That was the trigger, the mention of my father. The man who worked himself to the bone to leave us something, only for them to squander it. "Stop," I said. I didn't yell. I spoke with the projecting voice I used in boardrooms. "Everyone, sit down." "We're not here to take orders," Gary sneered. "We're here to talk sense into you." I said, "Sit down," I repeated, walking to the coffee table and clearing a space for my laptop. "You wanted a mediation? You wanted to tell everyone what happened? Fine, but if we're going to tell the story, we're going to tell the whole story." I plugged my laptop into the HDMI cable connected to the large TV above the fireplace, the TV I had paid for. The screen flickered to life, mirroring my desktop. "What is she doing?" Megan hissed. "She's crazy. Mom, tell her to stop." "Let her speak," Uncle Bob said, crossing his arms. "Let's hear her excuse." "My excuse," I began, facing the room of hostile relatives, "is that for 3 years I have supported this household entirely. I have paid every mortgage payment, every electric bill, and every grocery run. And I did it gladly because I thought we were a family." I clicked a file. A spreadsheet appeared on the giant screen. It was color-coded and undeniable. "This," I pointed to the screen, "is a summary of the unauthorized withdrawals and credit card charges made by Janice, Gary, and Megan in the last 12 months. The total is $28,000. A ripple of murmurs went through the room. "28,000? Aunt Linda squinted at the screen. "Janice, you said you were scraping by." "She's lying," Janice cried out. "Those are household expenses." "Sephora is not a household expense," I said, scrolling down. "Neither is the Horseshoe Casino, neither is the liquor store." "But the money isn't why I'm kicking them out," I continued, my voice dropping an octave. "I could have forgiven the money. I'm kicking them out because 2 days ago, while I was away working to earn the money that pays for this roof, they sold my dog." "Oh, for heaven's sake, the dog again," Gary threw his hands up. "Bob, tell her, it went to a farm, a nice Amish farm. She's hysterical over a pet." "A farm," I said. "Right, that's the story you told Aunt Linda, that you found him a beautiful home." Yes, Megan shouted. We did it for him. Let's look at the farm, I said. I opened the video file. It was the footage I had taken the night before. The shaking camera panning over the dark, muddy yard, the sound of 100 dogs barking in despair, the beam of the flashlight hitting the wire cages. And finally, the shot of Rusty, matted and terrified, pressing himself against the chain-link fence of a puppy mill. The room went deathly silent. You could hear a pin drop. This is Steve's Golden's, I narrated coldly. A puppy mill 40 minutes from here. This is where Megan sold him for $1,200 to buy iPhones. I switched the image to the affidavit signed by Steve. And here is the statement from the breeder confirming that Megan sold him under false pretenses, claiming he was a stud dog, knowing full well he was neutered, effectively committing fraud. I turned to look at Aunt Linda. Her hand was covering her mouth. She looked from the screen to Janice, horror dawning in her eyes. Janice, Linda whispered, you said he went to a family with kids. I didn't know, Janice stammered, shrinking into the sofa. Megan handled it, I thought. You knew, I said, cutting her off. You sat there drinking tea while I cried, and you told me I would get over it. You knew he was sold for parts. You knew he was cash to you. I closed the laptop. The silence was heavy, suffocating. The moral high ground they had tried to stand on had just disintegrated beneath their feet. So, I said, looking at Uncle Bob, if you think they should stay, Bob, you are welcome to take them in. You can pay for their Sephora. You can pay for their gambling. And you can watch your pets, because if they need a new phone, your dog might be next. Bob looked at Gary with a mixture of disgust and disappointment. He stood up slowly. I think I better go. Me too, Cousin Mike muttered, avoiding Gary's eyes. Wait, don't leave, Megan shrieked, standing up. She's twisting it, she's rich, she doesn't need the money. But the spell was broken, the evidence was visceral, they had seen the cage, they had seen the numbers. Janice, Aunt Linda said, her voice shaking, I can't believe you let this happen. That dog was Arthur's favorite too. Janice flinched as if slapped. One by one, the relatives filed out. They didn't hug Janice. They didn't shake Gary's hand. They walked past me with nods of apology or averted eyes. The tribunal had rendered its verdict, and it wasn't against me. When the door clicked shut behind the last cousin, the room felt cavernous. It was just me and the three of them again. But the dynamic had shifted tectonically. They were small. They were exposed. You have 29 days left, I said. I suggest you start packing. The next month was a surreal blur of silence and cardboard boxes. I didn't stay in the house. I rented a small Airbnb nearby, a cottage with a fenced yard where Rusty could run without ghosts. I hired a property management company to oversee the move-out so I wouldn't have to interact with them. I received updates from the lawyer. The notice to quit was legally binding. Once the relatives knew the truth, the financial support Janice and Gary had hoped to crowdfund from the family evaporated. They were on their own for the first time in decades. On the 30th day, I met the property manager at the house for the final walkthrough. The driveway was empty. The rusted sedan that usually leaked oil on the pavers was gone. I walked up the steps, my heart thumping a slow, steady rhythm. Inside, the house echoed. They had taken everything that wasn't nailed down, the curtains, the light bulbs, even the toilet paper holders. It was petty, and it was perfect. It meant they were truly gone. There was a pile of trash in the center of the living room, fast food wrappers, old magazines, and the empty boxes of the iPhone Pros. A final middle finger left on the floor. I walked through the empty rooms. I felt a strange sensation. It wasn't sadness. It wasn't anger. It was lightness. The heavy, suffocating blanket of obligation that I had worn since my father's funeral was gone. I had cut the anchor. I went out to the backyard. Rusty trotted beside me, his tail wagging. He sniffed the spot where his old run used to be, then looked you. Pee at me and barked, a happy, demanding sound. Ball. I pulled a tennis ball from my pocket and threw it. He bounded after it, golden fur gleaming in the sun, free and safe. The legal fallout was slow but crushing for them. Because I pressed charges, Megan and Gary were facing misdemeanors for theft by deception. It wasn't prison time, first offenses rarely are, but it was a record. It was fines. It was community service. And most importantly, it was a permanent mark that shattered their respectable suburban family mask. Janice had moved into a small, one-bedroom apartment in a rougher part of town, paid for by her Social Security and nothing else. I heard from Aunt Linda that she was telling anyone who would listen that I was an ungrateful child, but nobody was listening anymore. The video of the puppy mill had circulated. The truth has a way of sticking. As for the house, I decided not to move back in. It held too many memories of betrayal. I listed it the following week. In this market, it sold in 3 days. I took the equity, a substantial amount, and bought a farmhouse 30 minutes outside the city. It has 5 acres of land, a wraparound porch, and not a single guest room.